Testing. All right, we're good. Now we'll just pass these three along the panel then. Okay. Get my cheaters on. I'm sorry? Oh, no, I'm okay right here. You're good.
Testing. Nixon 5. Okay. This
What you
this is
saying?
working. This works. This works.
It does. It doesn't need to be that close though. Like I'm trying to gauge. I think right here's. Can you guys hear me well in the back? I'm not going to make that statement.
All right, one more minute here and we'll get things started. Get a chance for the folks to sign in here real quick and we'll get things rolling. Please sign in real quick and we're going to get things rolling. Yeah, come on over, sign in real quick, please.
Just make one quick announcement.
Has everyone signed the release form for photos? Is there anyone here who did not sign the release form? Because I'm really hoping that you guys all signed it because I posted you all on LinkedIn last week. Okay, so you're all good? Did you guys sign the release form for photos? You're lying to me. There's a lot of lawyers here, I'm just letting you know.
All right, I'm going to get us started here while we're kind of just finalizing the name tags and signing in. But good evening, welcome, thank you for coming back. This is the third session here for our accelerator program, and we hope you enjoyed last week's about the business plan. Maybe a show of hands, did anybody kind of get some helpful, useful pointers from last week? Had some good questions, hopefully something to kind of help you along, and keeping in mind as these sessions go on, it's kind of in line to help you create for your pitches. As a reminder, again, please sign up. I'm looking at we're pretty good and diligent about doing that tonight. And also, I think we obviously mention this every week, but if you do have 2 or more absences, you're not qualified to do the live pitching. So one, okay. One absence, and then and also after 2, then you can't. You can submit, but it won't be reviewed. This week's session is actually going to be a panel discussion, and the topic, as you all kind of got already, is the legal and financial pros and cons of the types of businesses ownership and protecting your businesses from fraud. So with the panel discussion today, we're going to ask that, we're going to have the panel for the first hour. Please take notes, get questions, because the second half of this after we take our break is going to be your opportunity to kind of ask your questions of the panel. Tonight, our moderator is Ade Bakare. He is a member at McNeese Wallace here in Harrisburg. His practice in the firm is Energy Environmental Group. His practice focuses on issues involving water, sewage, stormwater utility services, as well as electricity, natural gas, and oil pipeline matters. And if you haven't already, please check out all the bios. I did send that, I think, to you all. And if I didn't, please let me know. If you didn't get them, you should have my email. So. Again, just some house rules. First hour, doing the moderator thing. Get your questions ready for the second half after our break. And without further ado, Ade, I'll let you take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. How are you doing tonight?
Good, good, good. Now, it's a little bit dark in here, but we're going to have a lively, energetic conversation with this amazing panel that we have for you tonight. So, I want you guys to be active, listen actively. They're going to pass on a lot of great information for the entrepreneurs in this room, and then later on, you're going to have a chance to ask them all questions. So let me go by briefly introducing each of the panelists, and then I'll start with the questions for the first hour of the session. So I'm going to go in order here. We have first Kofi Odum. Kofi is a seasoned entrepreneur and a founder and managing principal of Avoltry Odum & Co., a strategic advisory firm specializing in CFO services, financial planning and analysis, as well as capital formation. Kofi successfully structured and submitted over $750 million in funding requests, including complex deals for plant and equipment, land development, and construction. Next to Kofi, we have Zach Pasquario. Zach is a financial entrepreneur, private lender, and an Army veteran. Thank you for your service, sir. With 5 years' experience in bookkeeping with the company Harrisburg Bookkeeping. Zach is also the founder of Zip Capital, a private real estate lending firm that offers accredited investors fixed returns of 8 to 12% through secured first lien mortgage loans. Next to Zach, we have our resident Knicks fan, as you may have heard earlier. Andre Campbell, in addition to being a Knicks fan, has over 10 years of experience with Taurus Wealth Management. He creates tax-efficient strategies for retirement and estate planning. Next to Andre, we've got Katie Mason. Katie's, like me, an attorney, go law, in the firm of JSDC Law Offices. She's a general law practitioner with an emphasis on regulatory and transactional matters. She's been with JSDC Law Offices since 2013 and is a pivotal leader at that organization. Katie's primary concentration within the firm is banking and real estate, including loan structuring and consulting. Next to Katie, we have Jody Griffiths. Jody is a treasury management consultant at M&T, whose responsibilities include developing new treasury management business, expanding existing business relationships, and servicing the bank's treasury management clients. And last, but certainly not least, we have Professor Danielle M. Conway. Professor Conway is the Dean and Donald J. Farage Professor of Law at Penn State Dickinson Law. She's a leading expert in procurement law, entrepreneurship, and intellectual property, and she joined Dickinson Law after serving for 4 years as the Dean at the University of Maine School of Law, with 14 years also on the faculty of the University of Hawaii at Manoa, William S. Richardson School of Law. So as I said, this is a very distinguished panel here to speak with you tonight. I have the pleasure and the privilege of asking them several questions. We'll take a break after that, and then you all can ask them questions during the second hour. So as we go through my questions, make sure you take notes and be ready to ask questions, because it's always a great opportunity to have a chance to network with professionals like this and soak up their experience for yourselves as you pursue your own business projects and other endeavors. So without further ado, we will jump right into it. So out of respect for my fellow colleagues in the law, I'm going to go ahead and start with you two, and we'll kick off with some legal questions. So I'll throw one off, and whoever wants to take it can jump in. So first question of the evening. What are some of the key legal differences between operating as a sole proprietor, LLC, or corporation?
Hi, everybody. Whoa. Does that work? We can hear me okay? Okay, won't break anything. So, depending on how you're setting up a business operation, there's different structuring, and we're hitting on the main points here when we're talking about sole proprietorship, LLC. business corporation. So these are just different types of business structures. And a lot of times there's tax implications to that too, which is not as much my wheelhouse. Should I try again? How's that one? Much better? Oh, yeah. All right, there we go. So you probably hear these terms used a lot, frequently, just day to day, and sometimes it's, again, just helpful to kind of focus on what they're actually meaning. Sole proprietorship, when you're operating a business, means you're actually just operating under your individual self, essentially. For tax purposes, you're getting taxed through your social security number. For your business, it is you operating the business. A sole proprietorship is commonly used a lot of times with small businesses and stuff, but this is where tonight will probably be good to kind of learn what might work best for somebody and they're trying to set up a business. With the sole proprietorship, you have a lot more liability at risk because you do not have something between yourself and your personal assets and your business. So while it's okay to operate as a sole proprietor, and many people do, you lose that liability protection. So switching over to limited liability company or a business corporation, those companies are set up to provide the owners with essentially a liability shield is one of the big pieces to why we set up separate entities. Limited liability company is very much what it says. It's a limited liability company. It's giving the members of that company limited liability in the event that there's any lawsuits or anything against the business itself. You're also taking the property of the company and separating it from your individual assets. So if you're operating a business and you have, again, from the lawyer side, we always see the problems. You have somebody, a disgruntled customer come in, you're dealing with a lawsuit. If they sue the company, you are strictly looking at what assets that company holds versus what you individually hold. Your home, your individual assets are usually very well protected. There are some exceptions, but from the broad kind of perspective of things here, you have that protection in place. A limited liability company tends to be a default business setup for many people, particularly small businesses. They are very easy to set up, they're very easy to operate, they're easy to run, manage, maintain. So that often tends to be a default business setup. There are, and I don't know if we'll get into this tonight, there are new reporting requirements that from the state and federal levels that are now pulling in limited liability companies where they used to be excused from that. So that's something to keep in mind, but still, for all intents and purposes, it's probably your easiest business structure to run and manage. Business corporation is set up a little bit differently, and with a business corporation, you're usually dealing with shares, stocks of the company. Your owners are shareholders, whereas with the limited liability company, you're dealing with members. Business corporations have more regulations from a statutory standpoint, state and federally. So when you're setting up a business organization or business corporation, there's just a little bit more to it. For any business that you set up, with, again, a few exceptions, and I'll hit on them, you want to be registering these with the Department of State. So we're in Pennsylvania, so we'd be registering with the Department of State of Pennsylvania. I would always advise, again, if you're really looking at business startup or expanding a business, that you kind of have your key components, which a lot are here today: attorney, finance, insurance. Those are key advisors to getting this done right. So you can make sure when you're registering with the state, you're registering the proper forms, and that outside of even the registration of the state, you have your company set up correctly. There's a lot of things with a business corporation. Again, there's more involved. You would be having bylaws, very likely a shareholders agreement, resolutions, more formal company. You would have minutes from meetings and stuff like that. That's just a little bit more formal than the LLC setup. And I could go on for days about the business corporations. I'm trying to just hit the basics here with that question. Does that probably cover a good chunk? Any questions with what I hit on there? Yep.
So I currently have my LLC registered in Delaware. Is that going to be a problem if I wanted to operate in Pennsylvania?
So what you want to do if you have an out-of-state business and you're operating in another state is, again, we're dealing with a registration with the Department of State. You would file a registration to do business in Pennsylvania as a foreign entity. So, and that is something that, again, is fairly simple to do, but it's great to have direction from an attorney if you're need some assistance with getting that done. Another thing that comes up frequently too with these business structures, and particularly because we discuss sole proprietorship, is you can register a fictitious name with the state as well. So I'm Katie Mason, but say I'm doing a business as a sole proprietor as Mason Enterprises. You are not legally required to file what's called a doing business as name, a DBA name with the state, but it is highly recommended. And it again affords you a lot of protections too with regards to the operation of your business. If you're doing any sort of usually financing, again, when we talk insurance, you're doing anything formal, usually if you're operating under a fictitious name, you will be asked to show proof that you've registered with the state under that fictitious name. You see them a lot with sole proprietorships because, again, with a sole proprietorship, you're dealing with an individual. So you're not already starting with a corporate name. You're going to register the fictitious name that you individually are operating under. But any type of business corporation can register a fictitious name. For tax purposes, that fictitious name, again, always flows back to the original entity, whether it's the individual or if it's the LLC or business corporation. Any other questions? Yep.
Katie, let's
Oh,
pause
I'm
for a second
sorry.
because we want to
Yes.
go through with the other questions.
Get it.
Then we'll have plenty of time for group questions in the second hour. But thank you, that was an excellent answer and a great segue to a follow-up question, which is I want to talk to some of the financial experts here about what are some of the common mistakes that a small business can make in initial formation from a tax perspective.
So one thing I wanted to say, I looked at the email thread that this meeting was scheduled on, and bravo to everyone who has a domain after their email instead of @Gmail. And if you have a Gmail, it's very cheap to add that domain after your email, and it's something that will help your perception as a business owner immediately. So that was one tip I wanted to give you guys. As far as taxes with what a S corp versus a sole proprietorship, I know people like to read stuff or hear stuff on TikTok, and they get caught up in the tax savings of an S corp prematurely. Correct me if I'm wrong. I've done the math, and I don't think it's really worth changing from a sole proprietorship to an S corp until you're profiting roughly $150,000, because although you get tax benefits, you also pick up a big accounting bill and payroll services. So those are some of the things I've seen as far as S corp versus LLC.
I can verify from what I hear from the experts in my business group, that's roughly the number that we use when we advise our small business clients as well.
Yeah.
I can say something real quick about that. So for the S corp thing, so for the additional payroll filing fees, you're going to pay. Me personally, I have an S corporation, and it's actually pretty simple. I guess I'm a bookkeeper, so it's simple for me, but it's just Form 2553, and you can elect to be taxed as an S corporation. And so I just started a new company in January, registered with the state, registered an LLC. If you're a veteran, it's actually free. You can do it completely for free online. It takes about a week or 2 weeks to get your forms back. And then once you get your LLC, you get your EIN number. That's also free. You can do that on the IRS website. And then you can fill out Form 2553, and then you can fax it to the IRS. And a couple weeks ago, I just got a notice from the IRS that my LLC is now being taxed as an S corporation. So I did it all myself. You could probably pay an attorney or a CPA maybe $1,000 to do all that for you. But now that I'm an S corporation, I'm the owner of the company, so I have to pay myself a reasonable salary, which means as the owner, I need to be put on payroll. So that's what they're talking about, the additional fees. I use ADP to process my payroll. And so ADP is filing my payroll tax, my self-employment tax, my FICA, Social Security, Medicare, local, state income taxes. And I run payroll once per month, and they charge me $50 per month. And then my tax accountant charges like $1,000 for an 1120S, which is your S corp tax return. And then you're going to get a K1, and then you're going to use that K1 on your 1040 individual income tax return. So those are really the two big additional fees, the payroll processing and the additional tax return. So with a reasonable salary, just to kind of put it into perspective, let's say your business makes $100,000. If you pay yourself a reasonable salary, maybe that's 40 to 60% of your net income, that would be maybe $60,000. The big tax savings is self-employment tax. So all of your owner's distributions left over after you pay yourself your reasonable salary, business income, $100,000, net income, minus your $60,000 W-2 salary, your S-Corp business income left over is $40,000. And then you're not going to have to pay self-employment tax, which is also called payroll tax, which is FICA, which is Social Security and Medicare. You're not going to pay that on your S-Corp business income after you pay your owner's salary. So that $40,000, your payroll tax is actually a little bit more than 15%. So whenever you had a W-2 job, you paid 7.5-ish% of your Social Security and Medicare, and then your employer also paid 7.5% of your payroll tax. But now, as a business owner, you are employee and employer. So as an LLC, your entire income is subject to self-employment tax. But as an S-Corp, your income after your wages is not subject to self-employment tax. So you're gonna save on $100,000, you pay yourself $60,000, $40,000 left over, you're gonna save 15% of that $40,000. So that's where the tax savings come in.
Anybody else want to jump in, or do you want to move on to the next question?
No, I'll jump in.
Go ahead, Kofi.
There are two things in life that are guaranteed: death and taxes. So I'll take you all the way to your tombstone. From a business standpoint, we basically run all the numbers, projections, and we basically start working our way backwards. So as she said, you need a couple of subject matter experts on your team: legal, attorney, accountant, financial planner, insurance agent. So as you progress in your company, or as your revenues grow, we've already projected them. And your subject matter experts, attorneys, accountants, all jump in and basically say, oh my gosh, you know, we knew you're going to be making this amount of money after 3 years. This is the time to basically switch from one entity to the next. So that's how we usually approach it. We try to basically project your numbers for you, and when you get to that point, we already know that when you get to this point, this is the best entity to use to either attract more shareholders, minimize your tax liability. It depends on what you're trying to do, but you definitely want a good team, you know, surrounding you, but you always want to have your projections tight, you know, so that when you do get to certain milestones, you reach out to these professionals and say, oh my gosh, we did project we were going to be making this amount of money. Now that we're here, what would you advise me to do? So always reach out to, you know, your team members. Make sure you have a strong team surrounding you. Thank you.
Kofi, you mentioned one point about having your team behind a small business. I want to ask a question about that. Is it better for a small business owner to work with local entities for legal, financial, and fraud protection, or take advantage of services available on the internet?
That's real easy. I'm a cozy person. It depends on your style, right? It's always good to have local, depending on what your business is doing, because most of the time, local guys know local people who can connect you. Usually when I find an attorney, I know I'm paying him to be my attorney, but I know you have a Rolodex of other potential, you're a center of influence. So I always try to piggyback on that. So if you're sitting here in this room, you know, and you see, you know, any one of us panels, not only are you looking for advice, but you want to take advantage of everything that we have or bring to the table. You know, I'm always trying to refer my clients, you know, to other clients, you know, so I would always recommend when you start out, try and stick local, unless you just have an e-commerce business where it really doesn't matter. But even then, try to develop a relationship with, you know, people in the community that can give you advice. You know, if somebody's out there in the cloud, you know, most of my clients are spread across the United States and outside the US. But if I can pick up a phone and on the weekend call someone local, which that's what usually happens. When you find someone local, they were like, hey, you know what, if you have a question on Sunday afternoon, so long as I'm in church, okay, give me a call. I'll help you out. That's the territory that comes, with working with, experts that are, located, right around you. That's just my opinion.
Can I add on to that? I always tell people computers are only as smart as the person using it. You could put a phone in my hand and it's not able to do what you put that same phone in someone's hand who's good at technology. So a story, I had a client who was a do-it-yourselfer for stocks, bonds, and things of that nature. And he was using a very cheap software through E-Trade. It was efficient and got the job done. But what that computer never knew, because he never told that computer, is that he donated $200,000 a year to Shippensburg University. So when he told me that, casually in a conversation, I was able to set up a donor advised fund for him and save him tons of money on taxes that computer never would have told him about. So if you're looking to get professional advice from a computer or an online software service, it's actually only as smart as you are. So when you work with local people and people who have clients that you remind them of, I know you may be a real estate developer and you know nothing about R&D tax credits, but because I have other clients that work in your field, I can bring creative ideas to you that I've heard them say before. So I think that's the benefit of working with a person over a robot.
Can I add to that too? I just want to keep piggybacking off of this because I completely agree. There are a lot of online platforms out there that are great in terms of accessibility and ease and cost. I'm an attorney and I don't want to ever have to hire an attorney until I need one because it's expensive. But again, everybody holds these roles for a reason, and it can really come in handy and be super beneficial to you with the operation of your business. From my perspective with the legal, obviously what you see a lot online is LegalZoom and stuff and programs like that. And they work great for, basic needs. But what you have to keep in mind is that these are just boilerplate forms. They are not customized to what your needs are. And that's exactly where I think we were hitting on the point that, it's only gonna go so far as to what you tell it. And if you don't know what to tell it, you're not gonna get the benefit back that you would if you were sitting down with a local representative. And again, I know I'm more the legal side, but I cannot tell you from a tax implication standpoint how wonderful it can be to have a good financial advisor, CPA, that you can talk to, because you can have and find so many tax benefits in your operation of your business if you're talking to somebody who knows exactly what you're doing. Same with the legal, but again, I'm not a tax attorney, but I have just seen so many people been able to really, operate their businesses to the best, that they can in terms of tax implications and structuring just by having those local contacts in place.
One more real quick point. Go for it. So the other really cool benefit, especially if you're B2B, like if you sell your services business to business, entrepreneurship is all about networking. So if you're working with a local attorney or a local CPA, chances are they're also working with a ton of other local business owners. So if you had a landscaping company and your CPA also serviced a bookkeeper, like there's just a lot of opportunity for like a triangle to start happening. And like your CPA might recommend your landscaping services to the bookkeeper who is complaining about his yard. So just a really great networking opportunity, just kind of keeping that close-knit circle.
Katie mentioned one word I want to talk about a little bit, which is customization. That's an important word, and I want to piggyback on that theme a little bit, because we talked earlier about different types of business formations. But one question for the panel, are there certain types of businesses that are more conducive to one type of formation versus another? So across different kinds of industries, business sectors, real estate, banking, retail, are there different structures that you should be thinking of based on the type of business that you're running?
Absolutely. My mantra is always try and go with the most efficient that works for you, but also make sure, again, you have those needs covered. A really good example is if anybody's operating businesses that deals with state licensure. We have to deal with the state in a lot of licensing programs. I know you heard me say earlier, a lot of times a default business setup is an LLC because of essentially just ease and operations. But I do a lot of corporate law, and through doing that, I represent a lot of funeral homes. And funeral director law is a different animal. But there are specific, I'm trying to say that nicely, but there are, with the funeral director law, specific business structures that you can set up that benefit these funeral directors in Pennsylvania. And I will not go into the weeds with all of it, but with a funeral establishment, I would generally advise that they set up a restricted business corporation, which is a type of business corporation, because there are a lot of benefits to them in doing that in their industry. So that's where, again, kind of going back to the previous question, it's great to get somebody in front of you that you can be asking these questions to with what your specific industry is, because you become aware of things that you would not otherwise know. And again, while you can cover basics online, you really want someone who's focused on what you are trying to do, and then you can kind of figure out those what we were just saying, customizing to your business and how that can help you. That kind of plays into that business structuring.
Please do.
This is great, and I'm inspired to open a business. It's wonderful. I practice government procurement law, and so the type of business really is defined by the regulation for the kind of work that you're going to do with the government. And so, repeating the advice here, you want to talk to somebody who really knows the area, for example, of government contracts, because you want to know what size business that you have, how you match to solicitations that the government puts out, then what kinds of certifications you need to have. And so lawyers will understand what you can do to match with the work that you'd like to do with the federal government or state and local governments.
Excellent answer so far. I'm going to pivot a little bit to talk about one area that I know is of concern to a lot of small businesses, and that is fraud. So I want to ask, what are some basic internal controls that every small business owner should have in place to detect and prevent fraud?
Yeah, that's great. Okay. Yeah, it's this one. So first and foremost, how many of you have been subjected to fraud, whether it's personal or in your business that you have now or starting? Yeah. Okay, kind of, yeah. So if you look up at the definition of fraud, what is fraud? It's an intentional act of deceit designed to reward the perpetrator and exploit the victim. And of course, there's, different avenues. So when we talk about fraud, where it impacts a lot are the small businesses. And the reason why is because it's usually just a few people. So you have less resources. Maybe you don't have the necessary internal controls. Maybe you don't have the policies and procedures that you mean to put in place at some point in time. So what happens is you're not being necessarily mindful of the things that can happen in an instance, thinking about check fraud and what that could look like for you. And if a fraud instance happened in your business, how could you recuperate? How can you continue to run your business if a fraud event were to occur? So I agree with most of the individuals I've already talked about having that local presence. So making sure that you have your networking. So this is a great place to do that. And other people that, your banking individuals, whether it's your branch manager or whatever, can make sure that you are aligning yourself with the individuals that you need to be able to set your business up to be successful. It may take a little bit longer, but the priority of putting all of those internal controls into place is really, really important. Does that kind of give a general into fraud? I don't want to go too deep in the weeds.
But it ties together. It was an excellent answer that ties together the advice about getting your team together. So your team is actually going to be testing your ability to manage the risk that fraud or leaks of information or the leakage of personal identifiable information that you have for your customers, your team and how they test your risk procedures is helpful. It's not just get a lawyer for lawyer's sake, right? It's not just get a financial advisor because they're suggesting it. It's because these folks can work together to surround you when these risks occur, and they can test your internal controls so that if someone sues you for exposing their personal identification information, personal identifiable information, you can say these internal controls were put in place and they were reasonable, you were not negligent, so you're not going to suffer the kind of liabilities that come with those kinds of exposures.
I have just like a couple quick, actionable, like very specific tips. Debit cards. So I do bookkeeping, so I see like a lot of transactions. Almost all of the cases of people's bank accounts getting hacked almost always happen with debit cards. So I generally try to only use credit cards. If you want to use credit cards, you can. But yeah, I try to avoid debit cards at all costs. And then there's a thing called positive pay. I'm not sure what M&T Bank calls it. Maybe it's positive pay, maybe it's not. I know
We
bankers.
do call it positive
Yeah,
pay and
I know,
payee positive pay.
I know bankers love to push this service, and it does cost extra. I think it might be like $100 a month, so it might not be applicable for everybody. But once you start to get, a few $1,000s in your bank account, basically every morning you get an email and like, are there any exceptions for your bank account? Do you need to approve any ACH withdrawals? So no ACH transactions are going to be pulled out of your bank account without you approving them. So positive pay can be useful. It's pretty annoying because you have to like physically approve all the transactions, but it's better than losing thousands of dollars. Also, I've seen some of my bookkeeping clients have like shadow accounts or sweep accounts, and so in business, it's pretty common for you to give out your ACH instructions or your wire information. So some people will have these shadow accounts where if you're asking me for my banking information, I've got a shadow account set up. So I'll give you the account number and the routing number for that account, and then you can deposit into my shadow account, and then I'll transfer into my actual operating account. So I'm never giving out the account number and routing number for my actual operating account, but just this shadow account. And then also think about it, every time I try to avoid mailing checks if I can, because all of your banking information is literally on every single check. So we all know like the USPS isn't always the best, so checks get lost all the time. And if anybody gets a hold of a check that you sent out in the mail, it has your account number and your routing number. So if you don't have positive pay, I'm not trying to promote any bank's services here, but if you don't have positive pay, then if somebody gets a hold of your checks, then they could easily just hack your account.
I'm not gonna lie,
Yeah.
it's like music to my ears.
Yes. Exactly. Check fraud, you hear people talk about, oh, they thought checks would go away. Checks are not going away. They are here. They've always been here. It's probably the number one source of fraud. So all the things that, what's your gentleman, I'm sorry, Zach stated are very true. He's a bookkeeper, so he's in the weeds of that, and that's exactly what your banker that you're working with should be talking to you through. With small businesses, a lot of times there's specialized, pricing that can go into place. You're a small business, you're starting out, so maybe, we're able to work with you. Relationships are key, and so, as you all talk about the relationships, they're really key. So having a nice relationship with your banker, being able to trust, the individuals that are in your world, in your business, the day-to-day. The other thing, you talked about a shadow account. That was interesting to hear that. So I think we probably call it like a U-pick, where it's an account masking. So individuals, we work with the clearinghouse, so you'd get a letter, and you can provide that to a vendor or someone who's going to pay you. It's not your actual account number, and the money will go into your account. But if that information got lost or they tried to debit that account, it would never work in a debit instance. It only works in a credit instance. So that was just another add-on to that. You did a really good job there, Zach. I mean, you just like
This
killed
segment
it.
was brought to you by Zach and Happy Pay with M&T Bank.
Yes, I love that.
I was going to confirm that none of these panelists are sponsored, just to clarify that for the group. So I know that I'm just the moderator, but I have a microphone, so I am going to use it. Just briefly, I want to piggyback on something that Zach said. If you have a business credit card, I think that that's an incredible tool to have for a business. Some people don't understand that a credit card company, you are actually their client. They care more about you than the vendors that you deal with. And so if there is a fraudulent event, having a single business credit card where you know that this is where, my expenses are, this is where everything is, that you can walk through month to month and see what you purchased in any given period, that can really help you identify and work with the company to address fraudulent transactions expeditiously, as long as you monitor your accounts on a daily basis. If you're prompt, they can help you, but if you don't see it until weeks, months later, it is much, much harder for them to help you. Sticking with fraud for a second, we talked about internal controls and working with your team, but what about your third-party vendors? What can you do to protect yourself from fraud on behalf of your third-party vendors and mitigate risk through those relationships?
Abby? What'd you say?
Communication
Communication is key.
is
yeah.
key. Oh, she's got it though.
Okay.
I just put words out and then people.
No, you're absolutely right. Knowing the vendors that you're working with, how to vet them. So when you go to the bank and you open up your account, they're doing KYC, they want to know you and your customer. You want to do the same thing with your vendors. You want to know who they are. You want to vet them out the same way the bank is doing for you. So I agree with the communication is key. And then as you grow your business and you have employees as well, so you want to do the same thing with those employees. You want to vet those employees. Trying to think. As you grow, there is different program and software that you can use to kind of vet those different vendors. Within M&T Bank, I will say that we do actually offer a service that we call account validation service, where you're able to go in and you're able to, so let's say an employee and wants to say, here's my banking information, I need to get paid. Well, you want to make sure that you're paying the correct person. So you can put their account number and their routing number, you can put their name, and it'll validate, which is like a national shared database between financial institutions, to be able to verify if that information is true and valid. So same thing, when you're thinking about a vendor that you're working with, and all of a sudden you get an email, or you get a phone call, or even fax, they still try and do that. They're telling you to change the information of a vendor that you normally pay. And if you're not training your employees and educating yourself, you may go in and actually change that information. So now you're probably paying a fraudster, and it becomes very difficult to get that back. So that's vendor impersonation. So the things that you want to do to be on top of that is you can use what I'm talking about, which is account validation. That, of course, is with M&T. Other financial institutions have something similar, but you want to pick up the phone, you want to call a known source of the person that you've been working with and dealing with, and you want to verify that information. You want to do the same thing if an employee tells you that their banking information has changed. You want to pick up the phone and you want to call them at the number that you have. You don't ever want to change anything. And a lot of fraudsters, what they will do is they will make it almost like urgency. Like, I need you to do this quick, I need this now. Well, you're going to do what you need to do to protect yourself and your business, and you're going to do all the validations that you need to do before you change information that makes it very difficult for you to then, in turn, try to get your money back if it goes to a fraudulent account. Fraudulent account, that means now you've got fraud and you've been hit. What do? you're going to go to your financial institution and they're going to walk you through all the steps that you need to do. But you have to catch it. So I know someone had mentioned the daily reconciliation. That is key and priority. You need to be looking at your accounts every single day. You need to know what's credited, what's debited, where this stuff comes from. You need to know every transaction because it's your money, it's your business's money. And if you detect fraud, then you want to take all the necessary steps to be able to try to retrieve your money. So if it's M&T, if it's M&T and you bank with us, and it's the other bank that now has this money, we are working with that financial institution, so our fraud teams are working together, and our job is to try to collect that money, but it's not always guaranteed. So the sooner you know, the better, but there's just plenty of things to put into place to protect yourself so you're not be involved. You're doing all the things you can to try and mitigate fraud the best way that you can. I know you wanted to add something.
Yeah. So one thing I learned really early that I think will be helpful as you're making decisions, because I hear people, it's like a repeated thing. Once you grow, once you can afford it, once you grow, assign yourself an hourly rate. Like, how much is an hour worth of your time specifically? Because if your hourly rate, just to use round numbers, is $100, but this software costs you $25, instead of being cheap and not getting it yet, it is actually better for you to pay for it today instead of wasting an hour of your time. As I'm sitting here and they're talking about all the things that you have to do, I'm getting overwhelmed. But I forgot that I've paid or outsourced or delegated a lot of these tasks because they're significantly more expensive than my hourly rate. So you gotta make sure you're doing the most important thing in your job or your business and finding the resources and people that can help you do the things that are important but not urgent. So please don't go back and just stare at every transaction and double check everything, because that's not gonna make you money and you'll have nothing to look at. So find the team, the software, the people, make an hourly rate, find out, hey, once my hourly rate goes up, I can stop doing this myself and spend more time in my business doing income producing things.
So there's a recurring theme here of it takes a village. That's something we've been hearing, on and on again over the course of the past 40 minutes. So I want to just crystallize that for everybody here, that so far what we're hearing from the panel is you have to have the right team around you and know when it's time to expand that team, grow that team, and add new resources to your organization.
Yeah, the other thing that's important. How many people have, thank you. I love when people take care of me. And my remarks are actually going to say that. How many people have employees or team members? That's really good, right? So part of this is training them also to stand in your shoes and letting them know what your voice sounds like, what your communication sound like, and also making sure that they have the capacity to deal with your vendors. You have to trust, so you gotta build that trust through leadership. I'll give you an example. I run a law school. There are 300 people in the law school, and I have to keep track of everybody, right? There's no way. There's just no way. But we constantly have team meetings. We constantly have leadership meetings. We constantly have department meetings. And in those meetings, what we're doing is reinforcing best practices. And the best practices is a compliance term. And so by reinforcing those best practices, when I love the fraudster language, I'm gonna steal that. Mm-hmm. So when a fraudster comes and they're trying to fish for your information, the fact that you have trained your employees well on best practices, they'll question what they see immediately, because it's not how you would sign an email. It's not how you would construct an email. It's not how you would speak to a vendor. And if they know your voice, that means you've communicated to them and in practice recursively how they should be responding. And if they have any doubt, the best practice would be to immediately call you. And I will tell you this, and y'all can critique me on this. Even though I have 300 employees, I give them all my phone number. And I give them all my phone number because I'd rather that they call me and feel capable of calling me instead of them feeling the guilt of paying somebody $100,000 because they thought I approved something.
Just fun fact on that one, my law firm has a cybersecurity group, and I work with those professionals on many client cases. And one thing I learned is that most cyber crimes are not the result of any complicated technological hacking. It happens because somebody let them in. It was either a phishing email or somebody was careless with a notebook, but most cyber crimes result directly from simple human error.
Well, and to tack on to that too, and I know this is probably 101 for all of us, but just a couple key fraud prevention, again, practices to adopt. And you sit there and you're like, I just don't want to, I don't need to hear it again, I know it, but it really does start to ingrain in you with everything everyone's saying to try and prevent this, and not just yourselves, but truly who you're working with and your employees. But everything is just so electronic anymore, and it's easy, but be careful if you're ever sending any, obviously, wire instructions, financial information. It's so easy to just tack that onto an email, but that's also just so dangerous in terms of exposing it to fraud. Use a secure site, use a secure upload. Even as much as Microsoft Outlook and their 365 system, they have OneDrive. You can upload it and use a secure link, even if you don't have a fancy IT setup with your business yet. Those things are available to you, and they help protect your information. Another thing too is just insurance too. If you are getting to a point where, I'm always thinking liability side, there are specific cyber insurance policies that can be in place. Third-party vendors often love to save your financial information because they're running it over and over. Be careful with that because you don't know what their system is. That goes to what Jody was saying with vet your third-party vendors. Know where your information is sitting and that it's not easily accessible to other people. Again, I think just practices to adopt. We're doing IT trainings right and left, and I sit there and I get tired of them, but they're really key. I think we already hit on, do not click on links in your email or anything that is sent to you. If you're concerned about something, ask. And if you're trying to do something, go to where you know that vendor or that party has their official site, phone numbers, uploads, stuff like that.
Yeah, one thing that I wanted to add real quick, especially whenever dealing with vendors, there's nothing wrong with asking for referrals, and always check Google My Business reviews, like Google reviews, because chances are if somebody's trying to commit fraud against you, they've probably done it to somebody else. Or especially if you're hiring like a financial person or insurance or attorney or a bookkeeper or a financial advisor, like ask for referrals. Ask from somebody who you trust, like, hey, who have you used in the past? Who's your bookkeeper? Who's your attorney? Ask for personal referrals, check reviews, and then also, we didn't really touch on this, but with vendors and customers, I always recommend have some sort of contract, client agreement, scope of work, contract. Anytime you hire somebody, like I always want it in writing. Like, what are you gonna do? When are you gonna do it by? What happens if you don't do it? We all think that everything's gonna go great, but entrepreneurship can be kind of ruthless sometimes. And there are people out there, unfortunately, that aren't going to do what they say they're gonna do. So especially with all of my customers, all of my clients, before I do any work, there's always a client agreement that outlines everything. And I'm sure an attorney up here would be more than happy to draft a client agreement for you, but just always get it in writing, always have signatures. It always just alleviates frustration down the road.
I use 3 terms. Can you help me quickly for the audience clarify the difference between a bookkeeper, an accountant, and a financial advisor?
Yeah, so an accountant can do 4 things for you. They can do bookkeeping, they can do payroll, they can do taxes, and they can do CFO services. So there's 4 different things. So a bookkeeper and a CFO. So bookkeepers will look at what happened in the past. Bookkeepers categorize transactions, reconcile accounts, and generate financial reports. Everybody needs a bookkeeper. Everybody needs to have a bookkeeper. That could be you, that could be your spouse, that could be your friend, or that could be an outsourced professional, or it could be an in-house office manager or executive assistant. Everybody needs a bookkeeper because you need financial reports to file taxes. So bookkeeping tells you what happened in the past. Taxes, we all kind of know what that is. Like I said, 1120S is your S Corp tax, 1065 is your partnership tax, and then we all file a 1040 individual income tax return. The partnership and S Corp are due in March, and the April 15th, everybody knows that. So bookkeeping, taxes, payroll. If you have employees or if you're an S corporation, you need to have payroll. I don't recommend, don't try to do it yourself. I'm a bookkeeper and I outsource my payroll to ADP. So you could have your CPA do it, you could have your bookkeeper do it. Be careful having your bookkeeper do it because payroll is really complicated. I don't do payroll. I would recommend have your CPA do it, have ADP or Gusto do it, or some very trusted software company do it, or there's a ton of local payroll companies. Like there's a couple that I know off the top of my head in Mechanicsburg who only do payroll. So that's payroll, and then finally, CFO services. So bookkeeping tells you what happened in the past, and correct me if I'm wrong, CFO services tells you what's gonna happen in the future. That's budgeting and forecasting. And a lot of my clients ask me, like, hey, can you help me with my forecasting? Can you help me with my Q4 revenue predictions? And I always remind them, you're paying me $500 a month to do bookkeeping. Fractional CFO services is probably going to start at $2,000 per month, and they're not going to do any of your bookkeeping. They're only going to do your CFO services. So I just kind of frame that in my client's mind. Like fractional CFO services are great, super helpful, but very different from bookkeeping and tax prep.
Thank you very much. One question going back to cyber fraud. We talked a lot about fraud and how to prevent it, both internally and also with external vendors. But what are some of the consequences that can happen for a small business once fraud occurs? What should you be concerned about if you learn about fraud in your business, or you see that you've been hacked, or that? Please do.
So remember I talked about my practice is government procurement law. So if you have, for example, a government contract and you even sniff like there is fraud, you will be subject to significant federal penalties. I don't care what the size of the contract is that you have with state and local or federal governments, there is significant risk if fraud occurs and you don't respond to it. Now, on the private side, I will say you're subjecting yourself to civil liability or criminal liability, depending on what happens, how long you take to respond to it. This goes back to telling every one of my employees, here's my phone number, because that's exactly why I'm giving them my phone number, so that they know they can tell me what has happened quickly so that we can respond with best practices and avoid civil or criminal liability. But feel free to.
No, I think you hit everything there. And again, and that's what you heard me mention, insurance policies too. This is why with our law firms and with all these practices, we're required to have certain policies in place for, in the event fraud occurs. We have obviously attorneys, malpractice, stuff like that. That helps to cover it, but absolutely you want your response to be appropriate and everybody that's working with you to be trained to know how to respond.
And I don't think it impacts most small businesses, but there is a threshold in Pennsylvania. When you reach a certain level of employees, then you're subject to certain disclosure laws if there's a cybersecurity breach at your organization. So that's another thing to keep in mind. I've been told by our lovely host that it is time for intermission. So we'll pause for, I believe, some snacks and refreshments.
Yeah.
Hey, Ada. Yeah. So excuse me. I unapologetically have to go because my New York Knicks are in the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time in 25 years. So I figured.
Different reason.
Hello. So I figured if we wanted to start the Q&A section by just asking me questions and then I can leave. To give you a little background, I'm a financial advisor. I manage stocks, bonds. I help people retirement planning and things of that nature. So if you have any questions for me, I got a hard 6.5 minutes before I got to go. Go ahead. Yeah. There are bankers here that will be way better answering that question than me. I'm a financial advisor. Go ahead.
Do you recommend that people start in dividends if they want to get into the stock market, and if so, how?
What was do I suggest what?
Do you suggest people start looking into dividends if they want to get into the stock market, and if so, how?
That's a good question. So anything I say is general, okay? But when you actually sit down with an advisor, they'll lift the hood up and see more about your specific situation and give you like exact advice. Generally, I tell anybody, a business owner or personally, the first thing you need is about 6 months of expenses and emergency fund. Before you think about investing anything, you need to know that your business and your personal expenses can operate for 6 months. Because the stock market, believe it or not, does go down sometimes. So you don't want the market to be down and you're in the middle of an emergency and you're trying to pull out. So once you cross the threshold of savings and you're ready to start investing, if you're going to do it yourself and not seek a professional, buy a ETF that tracks the S&P 500. An ETF is an electronically traded fund. It is not a mutual fund, so it comes with significantly less fees and costs than a mutual fund does. If you buy SPY, QQQ, VUG, VIG, if you buy any of those, you're tracking the S&P 500, which are the 500 largest companies in America, by Standard & Poor's. Nice. Okay.
So I do have a question for you regarding mergers and acquisitions. Do you deal with that space?
That's probably him.
And LBOs like we filed?
That's probably him too.
Well, we'll get to that, but first I want to first apologize on behalf of the panel for having a Knicks fan disrupt this evening. You know,
Bing bong. My fault. Did I say that?
yeah, I mean he's normally a professional. I respect him, but Knicks fans they can't help themselves. So
Yeah,
please accept my apologies on behalf of the
Yeah.
panel for that.
Definitely not a Cowboys fan. I'll read them back to you then. Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, so the question was like, how do you protect yourself from people not paying you? You got to do the work up front, whether it's a legal contract, an agreement, or just being selective with the people you do work with. All work isn't good work. And if you know they have a reputation or an inability to pay you, you probably shouldn't waste your time doing the services.
So to the prior point, for further questions, let's start a new process. Raise your hand, and I'll come to you with the mic so we can make sure everybody hears the questions and the answers.
Absolutely. Okay. What was the second part?
Like, let's say you have that protection, then how do you collect later? Is that like small claims? and
Well,
things
yeah, I
like that?
mean, on the work I do, the work I do, you can't not pay me. I have your money. You know what I mean? So if the work you're doing, you probably have to have some form of ACH up front or have the proof of funds and the banking information before doing the work.
I can answer your question later from your perspective when,
Sure.
when you're trying to collect.
Yeah, and just related to that, with some of like the client agreement stuff,
Who the hell is that?
how to protect yourself against like injuries, or let's say a guest, trips over some of my equipment. How do you protect yourself against things like that? Is that just basic insurance that you need?
Umbrella policy.
Okay.
An umbrella policy is one of your biggest friends. I have a $5 million umbrella policy. I think it's like $200 a year.
Thank you.
Okay, sounds sorry.
So I have a question when you mentioned about checks. You said checks aren't going to go away.
All right, so it looks like nobody needs me here anymore.
Well, Andre
Nixon 5.
couldn't answer this question when I asked him. So are you able to put your shadow account on your checks?
No.
Okay.
Normally not. So that was Zach talking about the shadow account. So a check is actually going to debit your account. The way you protect your account from check fraud is what he mentioned, which is the different types of positive pay. So I know different financial institutions do something a little bit different. So I'll talk about M&T. I'll talk about from the lower end. We have reverse positive pay. And what that is you don't do anything different. You continue to write your checks. But every day, we're going to ask you that you log in to our platform to view the checks that have paid last night. You're going to click, you're going to view on the front of the check, you're going to view the back of the check, you're going to make sure it's exactly the way you did it. If it is, we're going to pay it. If it's not, you're going to check it and you're going to say return. So we're going to return it for wherever it came from. The way that looks in your account is you're going to see check 1234 for $500 paid, and then right below, like the next day, you're going to see check 1234 $500 returned. So that's reverse positive pay. Then there's two next levels. There's positive pay and payee positive pay. That involves you sending us your check run file from whatever ERP system, QuickBooks, usually a CSV file of all the checks from your check run. And you're going to load that into our system. And you can do that directly in the platform, or you can do it secure via like a file transfer or transmission so that it's secure, IP secure, your site's secure, ours is secure, and those two links are the only ones talking. You can do it that way. So we're going to match the data exactly the way that your check run is presented to M&T. And as those checks come through, if something doesn't match, we're going to do what Zach said. You're going to get an email alert. It's going to say it's a mismatched name, mismatched dollar amount. So you're going to view the same thing, and you're going to select whether we're going to pay it, we're going to return it. I know individuals then have checks that they may write on the spot, and then someone goes right to M&T, let's say, to go and cash it right away. Well, what happens, that teller is there with this check in front of them. They get like a pop-up screen that the customer has this service. You have to call, the teller is going to call and get verification. If they don't get verification, whether it's, let's say, Roy, because he's a branch manager, or our ARP team is going to reach out to our customer to verify that this is a legitimate check. If we don't get a response, that teller's not paying that check, and we just have to kind of wait until either you get back to us or you send us the file with that information on there. So there's three, pretty much different levels, or a full check block. Like, you're not ever gonna write checks out of the account. So we have businesses, and some small businesses say, I'm gonna have this account that is specifically for my payables, and I have this account that's specifically for my receivables. So I only want incoming credits coming into this account, and I won't ever have any debits. And so a lot of individuals will just lock it down. They will put an ACH debit block, they'll put a check block, and this account will be all their payables, and this is where they're able to do all their check writing and ACH debits. And then they put protections on those accounts whether it's on the check side or whether it's on the ACH side. Zach talked about it. We call it ACH Monitor, where you are telling us who is approved to come into your account and debit it. And if that individual, let's say PP&L, is trying to debit, come in and pull from your account, and you have them as an approved vendor, it's going to go through. But if you have someone that ends up getting your information and they start trying to pull, you're going to get a notification to go in, validate it. If it's legitimate and you say, oh, I forgot to add them, we give you the opportunity to add that vendor, approve it, and then attach like a dollar amount, like a max threshold that, let's say, PP&L could ever come into your account and take. If it's beyond that scope, you're going to get a notification. Yes, all of these come with a fee, but like I said, building that relationship with your banker and the people in, that your trusted people, your trusted advisors, they're going to be able to help you. They're going to be able to work with you to just make that pricing, what makes sense for you, especially if you're just starting out, but you want to protect it. And I think the Knicks fan said something about investing. It's going to pay off. You have to do those things that you need to do to protect your business and your money. So I know it's a long way,
one
but
more
fraud
question.
is whatever.
So you said about the what time to check your bank account. I know the bank has like a processing structure. What is the best time for you to check your accounts so that everything processes at a certain time when they close? Or
So if it's just you doing your reconciliation and you don't have a bookkeeper or someone else kind of doing those types of things, first thing in the morning. So if we're talking about fraud and we're notifying you about any items, so ours is by 10 a.m., you're gonna know what's paid the previous day. You're gonna know what's coming in, and we need an answer from you by 4 o'clock. So if we don't get an answer by 4, most defaults is to return. So we're gonna steer on the side of caution. You didn't get back to us. This doesn't match what you sent us. We're returning whatever is being presented because you didn't let us know. There's ways that if you use QuickBooks, you can do like direct connect, where you can connect, if you bank with M&T or any financial institution, a lot of times you can get that data to pull over every morning so you can see the information, so that links up. So that's another way to be able to see that stuff, but you still have to go into M&T for any fraud services that you need to review on a daily basis.
So I've got a client who pays me $1,500 per month, and he banks with Members First, and I do his bookkeeping, but I also go above and beyond, and they struggle with cash flow some seasons depending on the month, and so I literally go into his bank every single day, and I look at his balance and his pending transactions. And I used to do that at 3 p.m. And then I found that the next day, sometimes the balance was different. And I was like, what's going on? I would check, and I was like, that's weird. Like, there's some transactions that cleared after 3 p.m. What's going on? And so I changed my check-in time to 4 p.m. And it seems like, to answer your question specifically, it seemed like by 4 p.m., all of the pending transactions for that day had cleared. So I literally go into their accounts every day at 4 p.m., look at their current balance, look at their pending transactions, add it up, subtract it, just to make sure their account is not going to get overdrawn that day.
So if you guys don't mind, before we jump to another question, this gentleman over here had asked a really good question that I don't think got fully answered with regards to, because I think it's going to apply to every business in here. It's regards to how do I protect myself with regards to collections, how can I ensure that I get paid, what do I need to do? And just, if you don't mind, I'm gonna hit on that before we bounce around to some other questions. And again, keep in mind, I'm coming from the legal perspective here. But the best thing you can do is what was already brought up. Have a contract with regards to your services and payment that you have your customer sign. That's the best way to enforce payment if you do need to go collect on it. If not, there are arguments for implied contracts where you're getting payment for services rendered. It just becomes more difficult to win that argument versus if you have a contract in place. In Pennsylvania, contract controls. So anything you have in writing, you'll hear this from every attorney you ever meet, put it in writing. Anything you have in writing that's signed becomes just much more enforceable. And as a business owner, your biggest concern is getting paid so that you can continue to succeed and grow. Couple quick points on that. If you have a contract, a lot of people don't know this, but it's incredibly beneficial. Put a provision in there that says if you need to collect on the amounts owed, that the customer or whoever you're having sign will be responsible for legal fees. If you do that, any fees you incur in hiring an attorney to collect on that has to be paid and is incorporated into the judgment that goes against the person who owes the money. You don't then have to pay your attorney. It's excellent. It saves you money. You can turn all your collections over to a law office, and assuming that you're successful in the collections, you're not paying that directly. You're paying that through the customer. I think that was the main thing that I wanted to hit on the collections. Another question that I heard pop up was small claims court. If you have collections that I believe, and help me out if I'm wrong, I think 14,000 is the cap with the MDJ courts. Am I right on that?
Roughly, it's somewhere in that
It's about-
range. I don't know if that's exactly the figure, but it's in that range.
Yeah, so we can double check that, you can even Google that, but the magisterial district courts are essentially your small claim courts in Pennsylvania. If your claim is under 14,000, you can file in that court. It is much faster than filing at the county level. You also technically, and I shouldn't be the one saying this, do not have to have an attorney to do a small claims court action. You can go in and do the collection action yourself. I would always advise that you still retain an attorney, because again, especially if we've got this language in our agreement that the legal fees are covered. It's gonna be a little bit smoother and probably more successful with an attorney, but if you get into the groove and you wanna handle it yourself at that MDJ level, you can. I think that was everything that was brought up. I just wanted to touch on that before we moved on.
I have a couple of things to touch on that too as well, sorry. So I'm sure the attorneys have a much larger case study of successful cases, but from my very limited experience, just a perspective, I have one particular client who has had issues with their customers not paying, and this is just one very specific example, but just something to keep in mind. They went to small claims court and they've lost both times. So definitely great to have contracts, definitely great to hire amazing attorneys, but also consult with your attorney and maybe check, like, how much am I going to pay in legal fees? Do I really want to go after a $1,000 payment if I'm going to pay $2,000 in legal fees? So that's just something to keep in mind. And then the other thing so for my bookkeeping business, I have monthly recurring revenue, and all of my clients pay me the same amount every single month. And I got set up with my bank. I bank with Orrstown. All the banks are great, but I bank with Orrstown, and I have ACH origination. And so I'm able to not only pay people, but I'm able to pull money. Just like if you guys have your mortgage set up, like your mortgage company probably pulls your mortgage on a monthly basis. So I have it embedded into my client agreement. I got an ACH authorization form directly from my bank, and it basically just is the client saying, here's my bank, here's my account number, here's my routing number, here's the amount with regards to the services in this client agreement, here's my signature. I authorize you, Harrisburg Bookkeeping, to pull from my account $500 every single month. And so then I go back to my bank and I enter in their account number, their routing number, and then on the first of every month, I literally pull their payment. And it's just amazing. It's super cheap. It's like pennies per transaction, very cheap. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for that.
Oh, I just wanted to throw one more thing in there.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So because of what I do, most of my clients, I sit on most meetings with bankers, because of what I do. And for the return on your time, I can't stress this enough. M&T, it might look like we're promoting M&T, but whatever bank, right? But they've taken the time out and the resources to put this together, for a good reason. But if there was one thing you took out of this, find a banker. Because, the banker doesn't really charge you for the relationship, right? It's actually free. So whatever you do, whether it's M&T, Orrstown Bank, develop a relationship with your banker. Go into the branch, drop a few dollars. Anytime you swing by the branch, say hi to the branch manager, say hi to someone. Let them know you exist as a business. Because anytime someone comes to me, I had a client in Minnesota, when she started working with me, she was paying about $150. A month. And she usually cry when she was paying that amount of money because she didn't have any money. But right now, she's pushing $5 million a year. We don't even know what to do with the money, honestly. You know? So, but the bank relationship is what really got her there. The banker calls me, hey, you know, we want to do this, we want to do that. We explain things. Let me get back to you. They go talk to the vice president or whoever. You know what? They can speak on your behalf as well. And it's free or complimentary. I guess nothing's really free, but it's complimentary, okay? So if you got anything, try as much as possible. When you leave here, go develop a relationship with a banker, the branch manager, whoever it is. Let them know you exist as a business owner. And that's definitely going to get you somewhere.
And if that's the kind of stuff you're going to interrupt with all the time, please do. No, thank you. Yeah. It is free, right? Complimentary. Okay, we like the word complimentary. But truly, make sure, guys, know your bankers. Okay, so Roy is back there. I think she was first. 1, 2, and then 3. Oh boy. Okay, so you're gonna have to raise those hands again after this.
Okay, so I know we talked a lot about big business, and I'm sure I can speak for a lot of us. We're all smaller or just starting out. So one of the things I think he was starting to touch on was preventing ourselves from fraud on the credit card level. So what I do, and a lot of us do, or take these payment systems through whether it be Cash App, Afterpay, or Zelle, or even like I have a payment system. So my booking system, like it takes through that, but like people can do like theft of services and things like that. So I'm protected with my booking software. But what about people that don't have those things? So my other question is directly for the bank specifically. So I have a credit union for my business accounts, but I don't use them for my merchant services because I wasn't sure. One, it was a lot more expensive because I didn't have the volume yet. So they're like, oh, we work with small business, but it was a lot more expensive than what I was currently using. 2, I had experience with some other owners in the line of work that I do, and they were losing their disputes. So they were losing money. And if it's not over $500, then they weren't able to file the police report for theft of services. Or they were forced to take it into small claims court and spend more money. So I guess my question is specifically to the banks, what does that process look like for you guys when we are, what kind of support do you guys have when someone is trying to do chargebacks for small businesses? Because like I said, they dispute all the time. And I know, even when I was using Cash App directly through my bank account, I could dispute it if it went through my bank account versus just sitting in that money. But like I said, Vigero is who I use for my booking site. They fight for me based on my contract. They had someone look over that. But does the actual bank, my local bank, do that as well? Or do you guys have that type of team? And what type of support do you have for chargebacks?
So you do get support from the bank, and I don't know if any of the branch managers are in here that could speak a little bit more about it. And I say that because in my realm of what I do at the bank, I'm all treasury management, so I don't deal a lot with the credit card piece. So we have a whole credit card merchant team and all that supports this in particular. Chargebacks are very tricky, so I get where you're coming from. So I don't know if anyone in here, whether.
So I could speak a little bit.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I was going to take it, and I was like, oh wait, someone else is going to take it.
Thank you, Lorena.
So 9 times out of 10, and I hear what you're saying with the credit union, but 9 times out of 10, banks really don't own merchant services. Merchant services, which is the credit card swipes, is done by a completely different company. So we use First Data, we use WorldPay, we use NCR. So there's a bunch of different every bank, I worked for 4, use different companies. So it all depends on that contract that you're signing. So there's not one right answer. It all depends on who that company uses. I guarantee you your credit union uses one of those companies.
I don't use my credit unions. I use my booking site,
Okay.
So whoever they use. So, but like I said, another owner of a salon, they were using through their bank, like a merchant services account, and they were always losing. And even though on our booking sites, we have all the contracts, had lawyers, I've had Legal Shield go over, all of my stuff, but I always win my disputes with whoever Vigero uses or whatever is there, but it just was something like I just found odd. But like, again, I just feel like that's really important for a lot of us small business owners.
Huge.
Yeah,
Absolutely,
huge, because
100%.
That's we face more
That's
of that
huge.
fraud than the cyber fraud. You
Yeah.
know, because we're still trying to, like, in this phase of where we're at in business.
Yeah.
When we're taking those P2P
Credit cards,
payments
yep.
and all that stuff, you know.
Yep. So again, exactly what you just said, knowing your banker is the key to that, because the banker, even though that's not us as a company, anyone that is your banker can go to whoever our merchant services department is and fight that for you. If you don't have a banker that you can go to and you're using an outside source, you may have more of an issue. I have plenty of customers that did that because it was cheaper to use, an outside source or direct with First Data. They don't have anyone that they can call. So that's where knowing your banker comes in. I don't know what your bookkeeping service has. Do you know of that?
I know they use Gusto for like payroll.
Oh, booking. I'm sorry. I thought you were saying bookkeeper. So your booking it's probably through First Data because they do a lot of booking.
I don't remember.
Who did she say? Gusto?
I know they use like Gusto and they are linked with them, but I'm not sure who they're like. It's just
I'm not
my
familiar
software.
with them, but most likely that piece is in the contract that you're signing. So again, the credit union wouldn't have that contract. Whoever their first merchant service provider would have that contract.
So the bank can only protect me for ACHs. Is that why is that in debits?
That's the fraud portion.
Right.
So the
that's what
Yes.
my question is. So
So the
maybe I'm
merch-
getting those entities confused.
They're completely separate. So one is treasury management, like what Jody's speaking about. The second is the merchant service piece. The bank can't protect you from merchant service. The merchant service company that your bank uses would protect you. Okay, but the bank has pull there, is what I'm trying to say.
Gotcha,
So you
okay.
can go to the bank and be like, hey, this is what's happening. We have a direct line with First Data and we can call them directly. Okay. Does that make sense? Okay, perfect. Yeah.
Next to the branch manager, you also want to get to know the treasury department really well. I actually have speed dial, and I call my treasury department all the time. 2 days ago, my wife was trying to use my debit card and pressed the PIN, entered it twice the wrong PIN, so it locked the debit card. I just called because of the relationship. Sometimes the bank knows, okay, hey, Kofi, come on, you've been calling here 5 times today, but because of the relationship I have with them, it's very cordial. Oh, I'm so sorry. They just go in and just reset. Kofi, we got you all taken care of. Thank you so much. But that relationship is very, very important. I can't stress that enough. A lot of us sitting here don't have loans because we're just scared to go into the bank thinking that it's maybe the police or the IRS. I don't think the bank is, but just get to know them a little better. I had a client once. They needed a $75,000 loan. They had never been to a bank branch before. I said, go talk to the bank branch manager. They went in, they had everything ready, they got approved for $75,000. And the only reason they were running into challenges was because they were scared to go into the bank. So I can't stress that enough. You might think, yeah, but you try it out and see. If you go to M&T and they don't provide the service you need, take your business down the road to F&B Bank. Yeah. If they don't provide services, take it down to Members First. Take it to some other bank. But at the end of the day, get a bank to know you really well.
It's true, and thank you. I feel like I should carry him around as my commercial. But anyway, we had 2 up there, then we had her, and then we had him. Okay.
Yep. Hi, I just have a quick question. I do have an LLC. Am I required to pay myself always, or can I just, for tax purposes? Because I just take money out whenever I need to pay a bill or something, but I'd rather not pay myself.
Yeah, so the salary requirement is only for an S corporation. So if you just have a regular LLC or a sole proprietorship, LLC not taxed as an S corporation, there is no difference between the money sitting in your bank account and whatever money you transfer to your personal self. So a big mistake that business owners make is they think that whenever I transfer money from my business account to my personal account, they think that that is an expense, and they think that flows through their profit and loss, but it doesn't. So at the end of the year, let's say you have $50,000 of net income. If you have $50,000 sitting in your business bank account, that is the exact same tax implications as if you had $0 sitting in your bank account and you transferred all of it to your personal account. So I've literally had people tell me like, oh no, it's still in my business account. Like I didn't make any money. Like I don't have to pay any taxes this year, but that's not the case. So when not an S corp, you don't need to run payroll. If you're not taxed as an S corp, you can simply write a check, or you can just do an ACH transfer from your business account to your personal account. And if you're doing your own bookkeeping, that would be an equity transaction. So it's not an expense, but it's an equity transaction, typically referred to as owner's pay, owner's draw, or something like that, members' equity, something like that. So it has no effect on your profit and loss. It's a balance sheet transaction. And then also, just to touch on this real quick, one of the biggest mistakes that a business owner can make when it comes to personal transactions and paying themselves is just thinking, I'm just gonna have one account and just pay everything through my one account. That's like the number one thing that I recommend every new business owner. Just first of all, just get a separate business bank account, and then only use that for your business transactions, because the act of bookkeeping and organizing your finances is just sorting through your individual transactions. And me as a bookkeeper, I don't care about your personal life. Like I don't want to see your personal transactions, so they should not be flowing through your business account.
Just to tack on to that, you guys have probably heard these terms used commonly, but with what Zach's saying, an LLC is what is commonly referred to as a disregarded entity or a pass-through entity. And it's really just exactly what it means. It's passing through the entity and going to you individually. So for purposes of your tax returns, everything's flowing through your social security number. Even if you set up an EIN for your LLC, you can have an EIN for your LLC, but for tax purposes, again, it's passing through the business to you individually. And Zach hit on this earlier, and he's saying it right now too, but just so you guys are picking up on what he's saying with the tax elections, you can have an LLC that elects to be treated as an S corp, and then you're bypassing that pass-through piece. But you have to specifically elect to do that within a certain time frame. I don't know if you want to talk about that at all, Zach, but that's an option you can do as an LLC.
I can talk about it real quick. So 2 months and 15 days after the tax year. So it's too late now to elect to be taxed as an S corporation. It's too late now, but next year in January, fill out IRS form 2553 or have your attorney or your CPA do it. And then it's super, super simple to elect to be taxed. Just do it in January or February, and then fax the form to the IRS. I recommend don't mail it, fax it to the IRS, and then they will send you a letter in the mail. They will either tell you, hey, you messed it up, do it again. They're probably not going to tell you what you messed up, so consult with your CPA or your attorney, or they're going to send you a letter saying, hey, congratulations, your business is now being treated as an S corporation. 2553.
So we're going back and forth here. As this goes back to having your team, sometimes this stuff is beneficial to you and sometimes it is not. This is where you want to be talking to your accountant and say, is it worth me making a special tax election here? It's not just restricted to LLCs, but that's where, again, it's great to have your contact people to say, what is going to work best for me here for tax purposes? Kind of want to hit on something just because you guys have to do it sometimes, but I don't know how relevant it is. How many people have had to fill out a W-9 for their business? Quite a few. This is just kind of quirky. I don't even know, again, if I should be bringing this up, but if you have to fill out a W-9 and you are a single member LLC, because of exactly what we're saying, it's a pass-through entity, on the W-9 form, even though you list the business, even if that LLC has an EIN, you're still listing your social there. If you have a W-9, you're going to list your name, the business, you'll list your social when you're submitting those forms. Those are commonly requested, and that is, I don't know if I said this out loud, that is only for a single member LLC. That does not apply if you have multiple members. And again, I don't know if I went too far there, but that's just something that has come up quite a bit recently.
Hang on, we got 3 people online. I promise I see you, and we literally have 8 minutes. So just so you guys know, I promised all of them they have to, yeah.
All right, we'll make this quick. I'm Joseph. I'm the founder of Mondever, a real estate development company that's building a sustainable city in Nakuru, Kenya. So we've been through a lot over the last couple months. I raised through my LLC some capital from an investor, but through a membership interest agreement, but talking to some attorneys, securities attorneys, they said that I wasn't supposed to do that because he's not an active member. So now we want to raise $36 million for the construction costs for the project. And we want to raise it in 3 different tiers. Tier number 1 is family and friends. Tier number 2 is accredited investors. And tier number 3 is venture capital firms. How would you advise me to go about this? Because the securities firm just told me that I have to pay $25,000 for their services.
Yes. So I'm not an attorney. I don't know what I'm talking about, but I have Zip Capital. It's a private debt fund. And so it's called a 506C fund. There's 506B and there's 506C. And I had to pay an attorney $20,000. You're going to get what's called a private placement memorandum. And then you're going to get subscription documents and an operating agreement. And the 506C that means that you can only take on accredited investors, but you can publicly solicit. So you can advertise your fund. 506B, you can take on anybody, but you cannot publicly advertise. So unfortunately, you will have to pay $20,000 for the private placement memorandum, but it's the only way that you can legally raise capital.
Okay, so quickly, being that we are a small business, something that I find overwhelming on top of having to register for all these departments is I want to have that team. I want to have an accountant. But what does that look like for us? Is there monthly fees? Do you have plans for small businesses where we pay you a monthly amount, or do we pay you per service? If we need to talk to you, for consultation, do we pay you for that hour? How does that look for small businesses in those different fields?
So if you're a small business, I think the first thing I would say is check out Penn State Dickinson Law Entrepreneur Assistance Clinic. And Penn State has Invent Penn State in these launch boxes. And so the effort there is to support new, small, micro businesses who need that kind of advice and consultation. And then they would do a handoff once you're ready to another group, sort of like this. So you can Google it, it's on the website, Entrepreneurship Assistance Clinic.
Is that free?
It's free.
I love this, guys. Remember, take as much for free as you can get, right?
While
That's
we're at it,
awesome. Thank you.
any advice on workers' comp insurance companies?
Well, no, when you go, she can help you with that, but when you go to the Entrepreneurship Assistance Clinic, you can ask all those questions and find out who you can get to service you.
I just have a quick cheat code for you. So minimum, whenever I was getting started out, bookkeeping, $200 per month is the minimum that I was charging. So if you're looking to cut cost, don't hire somebody like me who has been doing this for 5 years. Maybe try to find a newer bookkeeper. You also run the risk of them maybe not being as experienced, but I'm going to be much more expensive than somebody who's just now getting started. So $200 a month, and the cheat code is, the way I quote, don't tell anybody this, but I charge $2 per transaction. So I'm going to request your 3 most recent business bank statements and credit card statements. I'm going to add up all your transactions, divide it by 3, find out how many transactions you have on an average monthly basis, and then I'll multiply that by 2. And so you can go back, you can all go home right now and look at your transactions, add them up, and figure out roughly how much you might expect to pay a bookkeeper.
That's a great cheat sheet, guys, because I had no idea. That's awesome.
I guess QuickBooks actually has a Pro Advisor certification that you can actually do on your own. And he actually has a YouTube page as well. It's a bookkeeping expert. So he talks, I think, once a week. It's free. Go get the free service, okay? And then when you can afford him, then you basically reach out to him. But bookkeeping expert.
I had one question, or now I have to. Do you want to make money? Like, you're just giving them for free. Yes, you. You're just giving this stuff out for free.
So I'm not really taking on new clients right now. I kind of am, but I'm kind of not. So I'm mostly focused on raising capital for my 506c debt fund. So that's why I'm up here giving away all this free information.
It all makes sense now. No, but the main question that I had is actually for Kofi, since you have overseen the growth of a lot of people that you've mentored over the years, both students and CEOs alike, and you even mentioned like a story of somebody that went from being in a bank and asking and then having like 5 million. What did these success stories that you oversaw personally do when they started out that resulted in that longevity and that growth?
You gotta grind. You know, you have to grind. Sleepless nights, people are watching TV, a lot of things you have to sacrifice. Everybody has to pay the price. You know, some of my wealthiest clients work harder than I do. You know, just last month, you know, they wanted to travel. They had worked, they were crying when they started out with me, for goodness sake, right? For over $150 bill per month. Now they're like, oh, Kofi, I want to fly, Emirates. I've never flown in the first class, it was $25,000. I said, you know, just go ahead and buy it. Okay, she came back, I loved it. You know, she's in France right now. She wants to buy a villa in Italy, you know. So the grind, you have to pay the price. A lot of people just look at Mark Zuckerberg or Dell. These guys, you know, worked their tails off. That's the one thing, if you have that and you never give up, you will succeed. You know, they always say 50% of businesses fail in the first year. You know, toss that out. If you have a plan and you stick to the plan and you have people around you, you will succeed. This is the land of dreams. The American dream is real, guys, but you have to pay the price.
I love that. Thank you. I promised him like a long time ago. You had a question, right?
Just a quick question.
Yes, quick question.
So, first, last week I gave erroneous information. I was wrong, and it's not $400 in advertising. I included a whole bunch of other crap. It's only about $140 a month recurring. But my question, Ms. Mason, you just said something scared the hell out of me. When I fill out a W-9 form from a lot of my clients, I'm an S-prop, and I've been including my EIN. Should I be putting my social security number?
Yes, so did I just hear, yeah, you said this is for sole proprietorship.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, no,
prop,
I'm a sole proprietor.
proprietorship.
And
Yeah.
then but I have an EIN.
Yeah, and that's
my
really,
company is non-fictitious.
Yeah,
but
that is a really, and that's why I brought it up before. And this is something that even, you know, attorneys don't know, accountants. It's something if you go to the IRS website and specifically say, how do I fill out my W-9 4A, the IRS will actually give a really good step-by-step how to do it. Sole proprietorship, single member LLC. Keep in mind the W-9 is a tax form. And so that is what they're looking at. They're saying, how is this company being taxed? So if honest, after tonight, if you actually hop on and just do that quick Google search, there's a million sites out there. Go to the IRS website. It will walk you line by line through how you want to fill it out for an S-prop. Same for an LLC, and also if you are a multi-member LLC or if you're a corporation, instructions are there. It just becomes a lot easier when you're getting taxed through your EIN. These are the quirky ones where we're actually, again, passed through, getting taxed through our social, but we have EINs designated for these entities as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yep.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Because I work in insurance and you guys were mentioning contracts, and everything that kept on coming up was like waiver of subrogation. So my thing is, in the contract, if you were to have with like a third party or anything of that nature, let's just say that insurance is not involved, would a hold harmless agreement still work in that aspect?
Yeah, generally those contracts will hold up. Again, it's going to be very contract specific in terms of what's in there. But yeah, I get what you're saying when you're dealing with subrogation and stuff a lot too. That's and not every state is the same. I'm speaking on behalf of Pennsylvania, but yeah, it will. But we've got to look and see what's specifically provided for in the contract.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm just going to ask just because I think it could benefit. Having a micro business, I was told by an accountant that if you're always taking losses, after 3 years, the government will consider you a hobby. Is there truth to that, or what do I have to be scared for?
This might, I was going to say, this might want to go more towards our financial guys, but in general, when you are a startup, it is very common to see losses in your initial years, in your initial startup years. Don't let that discourage you, but do you guys want to hop in?
I don't know if that's true. It sounds weird, but the one thing I do know is if you declare yourself as a hobby, I'm pretty sure that means you cannot write off your expenses, but that's all I know.
So there are a couple of key words the IRS likes to use: ordinary and necessary and economic. The IRS wants to promote economic activities. You know, I usually like to lean on the side of principle and not rules. If you're really doing something for an economic reason, even if the IRS calls you, say, you know what, I'm grinding, bro. You think 3 years of losses is a joke? I'm trying to provide an economic, benefit to the United States of America so I can pay my taxes someday. Yeah, but if it's a hobby where you're buying art and you're not real serious about it, you're watching TV half the time, you're on vacation, and IRS calls you, you're going to have a hard time trying to prove that it's an economic activity. So always keep that in mind. If it's an economic activity, you can deduct your ordinary and necessary losses. But if it's not economic, it's a hobby.
And I could add to that. So I have many small business customers that show a loss almost every year. Okay, so I don't know that that's true. Listen, I'm not a lawyer. I see it every year. And it's more because of write-offs. When they're looking at depreciation, interest expense, yeah, that gets added back. But as far as like a income, I have a lot of businesses that show a loss.
Well, and I'm hitting on, again, I think basics here, so forgive me if I'm telling everybody something they already know, but keep in mind, particularly as a startup, that you do want to try and expense to get your revenue down as much as possible. Expense anything that you can legitimately expense, so it's not showing necessarily such a big profit to avoid that tax liability. But you do want to do it within the confines of, how we're supposed to be doing that. So
until you need lending, then you got to show something. Okay, that's just
one more. Just to go off of lending, sorry, I'm a startup as well, and my initial question earlier was which direction is it best to go to seek that funding? SBA loan, working with venture capitalists, or your local bank?
I think a lot of time for a startup, it's going to be what are you going to qualify for at that stage. I get involved with, and I'm going to actually, I know Jody or any of the bankers here will probably want to fill in. I get involved with doing a lot of creditors' rights. We've seen all sorts of different financing and loan structuring. SBA is wonderful for small businesses in the event, in my mind, that you can't qualify for something else.
True.
Yes, it allows for a lot of different lending opportunities for small businesses that aren't qualifying for conventional lending or some other opportunity. So that is when it's worth going the SBA route. Also, with all of us coming out of COVID, SBA actually pushed out a lot of good programs and waived a lot of fees. In that moment, it was really good too. Keep in mind when you're doing SBA, extra steps, and there's fees involved. But again, it gets you to where you need to be when you can't necessarily qualify for something else. It's not necessarily the best option, but sometimes it is the only option for a small business, and it gives you kind of what we were talking about earlier, those opportunities where it's like, I'm small, I might not necessarily have all the resources yet, and it still gives you that outlet. But again, that's gonna probably be a basis of review of where the business is at and what do we qualify more for. But Jody, Lorena, do you wanna?
This is another know your banker, right? Know your bank. So most banks, like I work for M&T Bank, I don't work for the SBA, but I do SBA lending. So your bank, a lot of banks, a lot of credit unions don't do SBA, so just be careful. You can walk into any bank. Even if you bank at a credit union, it's okay to walk into a bank. You can look online to see who the SBA preferred lenders are. They'll tell you, they'll give you a list of banks that actually work with the SBA. So 100%, yeah, we're at the top, M&T Bank. Yeah, check. I feel like you guys did enough promoting for that. All right, guys, I know we ran a little bit over. What I would ask your people, thank you guys. You were so awesome. Round of applause. Remember, you have their information, right? So, network is your net worth. Remember that. This is why we lend this to you. We want to make sure that you have the answers. What Danielle shared, I didn't know that. I didn't know that you had that service down at Dickinson. So that's huge. I mean, it's free. Penn State. We are, okay, so I'm a Penn State fan. So folks, remember, keep this in mind. Make sure, thank you guys all for all of your attention today. Thank you, Danielle. Thank you so much. Guys, next week, same place. We're gonna be talking, we're gonna have another panel, and we're actually gonna start the pitch, preparing for your pitch, okay? So remember, you must be here, one absence, and it has to be excused in order to compete in the pitch, okay? Someone was just waving to me because they wanted me to say something. Angela? Surveys, please hand your surveys down here at the table. Thank you guys, thanks for your attention, have a great night.